On the night of January 31st, 2019, snow blanketed the quiet streets of Hull. Inside the University of Hull dormitory, Libby Squire, a 21-year-old student with bright eyes and a radiant smile, was getting ready for a fun evening with friends. She had just finished her exams, texted her boyfriend goodnight, and added that she was leaving her phone at home. A small detail, but one that would later haunt an entire nation. At 11:20 p.m., security cameras captured Libby being denied entry to a nightclub she was too drunk to get in. At 11:37, she was seen stumbling through the snow, crying, refusing help from strangers. By 12:08 a.m., a silver car pulled over to the curb. A man was inside. Libby stepped into that car, and that was the last time the world saw her alive. 7 weeks later, her body was discovered floating in the icy waters of the Humber River, more than 10 kilometers from where she vanished. The delicate necklace with the letter L still hung around her neck. What happened during those missing minutes? How did a beloved young woman with her future laid out before her become the target of a predator hiding in plain sight? That night, Hull didn't just lose a student. It awoke a monster that had been walking quietly among us all along. Before her name appeared on every newspaper in Britain, Libby Squire was simply another college student, bright, warm, and ambitious. Friends remembered her laughter echoing through the dorm halls, her wit sharp but kind, her future stretching wide open ahead of her. After years battling an eating disorder and self-harm, Libby had finally found her balance. She was in love, doing well in school, and, as her mother later said, happier than she had been in years. That night, January 31st, 2019, Hull was bitterly cold. The temperature hovered around freezing, and a thin veil of snow fell quietly over the streets. Inside her small dorm room, Libby pulled on her sweater, fixed a bit of lipstick, and joined her friends for a night out. At 11:20 p.m., security footage showed the group outside a local nightclub. Libby swayed slightly, smiling, her words slurred. The bouncer shook his head. She was too intoxicated to enter. Her friends did what any good friends would do. They called a taxi, handed the driver cash, and said, "Please make sure she gets home safely." At 11:29 p.m., the taxi pulled up in front of Wellesley Avenue, where Libby lived. The driver later said she stepped out and walked toward her door. Then he drove away. He thought she was safe. But Libby never went inside. 10 minutes later, another camera caught her wandering down a nearby street, unsteady, coatless, her hair damp with melting snow. At 11:37, two passersby found her crying, kneeling in the snow. They offered help, but she refused, mumbling incoherently. Lost, frightened, and confused, they walked away, thinking she would be fine. She wasn't. A few minutes later, a group of students saw her near their house and invited her in to warm up. Again, she declined, continuing to drift aimlessly into the night. Investigators would later note that she was likely entering the first stages of hypothermia, her body shutting down, her mind slipping into chaos. At 3 o'clock in the morning, after the party ended, her friends texted her roommate, "Is Libby home yet?" The reply came seconds later, "No, I haven't seen her." Within the hour, they called the police. By dawn, the case was already spreading across social media, missing posters, desperate pleas, hashtags of hope. Police began tracing her last movements, interviewing friends, and checking every inch of Wellesley Avenue. Was it a mental breakdown? A voluntary disappearance? Her parents, Lisa and Russ, rejected that instantly. Libby had been happy, focused, alive.
Libby, my darling pie, we just want to know that you're safe. Please get in touch with us any way you can. The whole family is missing you, especially me and your dad, sisters and your brother. I miss you so much. It's breaking my heart not knowing where you are.
Please come forward with any information you may have, no matter how small or irrelevant it may be. We just want Libby home.
The city of Hull awoke to headlines that read, "Student missing after night out." But for those who knew the dark rhythm of criminal investigations, the real fear had already begun. Every passing hour without a lead, Every minute without a trace, the odds of finding her alive slipped further away. A young woman stepped into a taxi, believing she was on her way home, but the road she took that night was the one that would lead her straight into the arms of a monster. When police received the call, it was already past 3 o'clock in the morning. They began the search by tracing the taxi route, questioning friends, and scanning the neighborhood around Wellesley Avenue. Everything seemed to lead nowhere. Then, one witness stepped forward, a man who lived near the open fields. He said, "Around 15 minutes past midnight, I heard a woman screaming, loud, terrified." That statement changed everything. Investigators immediately began reviewing every CCTV camera across the area. Frame by frame, they followed Libby's trail, and then, buried in the grainy footage, they saw something that made every officer in the room go silent. A silver hatchback, the same car appearing again and again on different cameras circling the same streets near Libby's house. No destination, no reason. Each time, the headlights swept slowly across the same corner, the same stretch of sidewalk. At 11:59, it drove past once more. At 12:05, it turned back. At 12:07, it stopped. A man stepped out of the car, crossed the road, and began walking behind Libby, not too close, not too far. He moved with eerie precision, switching sides of the street, adjusting his distance like a hunter, testing the wind. At 12:08, he caught up to her. She stopped. They spoke. 5 minutes later, she opened the car door and climbed inside. No one forced her. No one screamed. But sometimes, danger doesn't need violence, only a kind face, a calm voice, and the right moment. When investigators watched that footage for the first time, they knew. Libby Squire never walked home that night. The car was later tracked through dozens of security cameras. Its route led straight toward Oak Road playing fields, a deserted area bordered by woods, the same place where the neighbor had heard those piercing screams. At 12:15, the headlights went dark. At 12:20, the car reappeared, turning away from the field and back toward town. By cross-referencing license plates, the police identified the vehicle's owner, Pawel Relowicz, a 24-year-old Polish immigrant, husband, father of 2, and local butcher. His neighbor described him as friendly, polite, a family man who loved baking and jogging, but his name wasn't new to the local police database. Over the past 2 years, Pawel had been accused multiple times of indecent exposure, voyeurism, and breaking into women's homes to steal underwear. He had even been caught peering through bedroom windows, but each time, the charges were dismissed or went nowhere. To most, he was harmless. To the few who looked deeper, he was escalating. Psychological profiling later confirmed it. Relowicz fit the pattern of a sexual predator in progression, beginning with observation, moving to intrusion, then violation. He lived 2 lives. By day, a devoted father and diligent worker. By night, a man roaming the streets, driven by twisted curiosity and compulsion. Predators like him don't kill out of hate. The silver car disappears down the road, swallowed by the darkness. No sound, no witness, just the quiet hum of an engine fading into the cold night. But within that silence, something irreversible had already happened. A young woman was gone. A monster had finally shown his face. When police knocked on Pawel Relowicz's door on February 6, 2019, he opened it with a smile. Calm, polite, almost rehearsed. The 24-year-old butcher invited the officers in, offered them tea, and said softly, "I was just trying to help that girl. She was drunk. I didn't want her to freeze." It was the kind of statement investigators had heard hundreds of times, a lie wrapped in civility. The search of his car shattered his story. Inside the silver hatchback, forensic officers found women's underwear, sex toys, used condoms, and dozens of photographs of women taken without consent, faces frozen in fear, captured through windows or from the shadows of the street. In his glove compartment were small trinkets, earrings, perfume bottles, hair ties, trophies stolen from the women he stalked. The polite butcher had a double life. As detective dug deeper, a pattern emerged. For nearly 2 years, Pawel had prowled the neighborhoods of Hull, He crept into gardens, peered through glass doors, and watched women sleep. He had been reported multiple times for indecent exposure. One woman woke up to find him staring through her bedroom door. Yet each time, he slipped through the cracks. No criminal record, no consequence. For the first time, police realized they weren't just dealing with a missing person. They were chasing a predator who had been perfecting his craft for years. One detail chilled the investigative team. The footage showed Pawel's car returning to the same field at 2:30 a.m., nearly 2 hours after Libby disappeared. He stayed only a few minutes, then drove away. There was no reason to go back there unless he was checking the scene, making sure no trace of what happened remained. Predators often revisit their crimes, the narrator explains, not out of guilt, but to feel that dark sense of control again, to relive the moment they believe they became powerful. Weeks passed. Search teams combed through the frozen parks, ponds, and rivers of Hull. Hundreds of volunteers joined, hoping for a miracle, but it never came. Then, 7 weeks after Libby vanished, a fisherman on the Humber River found a body floating near the estuary. It was badly decomposed, but around the neck hung a necklace with a small silver letter L. The coroner confirmed what everyone already feared. It was Libby. The autopsy revealed signs of sexual assault. Her cause of death was unclear, drowning or asphyxiation, but one fact was undeniable. She had been dumped into the freezing water after the attack. When police informed Lisa Squire, she collapsed. Later, she would say through tears, she was terrified of water. She couldn't swim. The thought that she might have been alive when she went in, it's unbearable. From that moment, the case shifted from a missing person investigation to murder. Detectives built the case, piece by piece: CCTV footage, phone data, soil samples from Pawel's car tires, DNA from Libby's body. Every fragment told the same story. He had hunted, captured, and destroyed her life that night. Evil rarely arrives with horns or blood. That night, Libby just wanted to go home. But in the same city where she dreamed of her future, a man was waiting, one who believed her fear was his right to possess. 2 years later, in January 2021, the courtroom in Sheffield stood silent as the trial of Pawel Relowicz began. Rows of reporters filled the benches. Laugh students, survivors, and families watched in grim anticipation. At the center sat Pawel himself, clean-shaven, calm, expressionless, the picture of an ordinary man. But beneath that composure was the face of a predator. The prosecution's opening line was chillingly simple. This man hunted women. He waited for one who was drunk, cold, and alone. That night, he found her, piece by piece. The prosecution rebuilt the night of January 31st, 2019. The CCTV footage, the timeline, the tire marks that matched the soil at Oak Road playing fields, and the DNA, his DNA found inside Libby's body. When questioned, Pawel lied. At first, he denied knowing her at all. Then, as the evidence mounted, he shifted. She wanted to have sex. It was her idea. The room froze. It wasn't just a lie, it was a desecration. The prosecutor's voice trembled, sharp with controlled fury. Libby was freezing, disoriented, barely able to stand. He did not help her. He exploited her weakness, violated her, and threw her body into the cold water. Lisa Squire, Libby's mother, sat quietly through every word. Her hands clutched a small photo of her daughter. She never cried in court. She didn't scream. She just stared at him, searching, perhaps, for a trace of humanity. She never found one. Forensic psychologists testified that Pawel displayed classic traits of antisocial personality disorder, a lack of empathy, thrill-seeking behavior, and complete moral detachment. He was not driven by anger but by desire for control. Each act of voyeurism, each theft of women's underwear, each night he prowled through dark streets. They were all rehearsals for something bigger. Predators escalate, the expert said. When fear no longer excites them, they crave total domination. Libby's death was not an accident, it was an inevitability. The defense tried to exploit one detail, the narrow time window between 12:11 and 12:20 a.m., Pawel would have had less than 10 minutes to commit the crime. Too short, they argued. Impossible. But the prosecution countered with quiet, devastating logic. It doesn't take long to destroy a life. 10 minutes is enough for a man like him. The evidence spoke louder than words. The screams heard at 12:15, the return of his car at 2:30, the DNA, the lies. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than a day. They returned with their verdict. Guilty. Judge Lambert's tone was grave as he read the sentence. Libby Squire had no chance that night. You hunted her, you deceived her, and you ended her life. You will serve life imprisonment, with a minimum of 27 years. Pawel showed no reaction, no remorse, no flicker of understanding. He simply blinked, his jaw tight, as though the verdict were an inconvenience, not a reckoning. Lisa closed her eyes. When asked later how she felt, she said softly, I don't feel relief. I feel empty. Justice doesn't bring my daughter back. Some monsters don't hide under beds. They hold doors open. They smile at strangers, and by the time we recognize them, it's already too late. After the trial, Lisa Squire didn't disappear into grief. Instead, she turned her pain into purpose. She began speaking publicly about sexual violence, demanding tougher laws for so-called minor sexual offenses. Voyeurism, indecent exposure, stalking, because she knew now, with absolute certainty, every predator starts small. If someone had taken those early crimes seriously, she said, my daughter might still be alive. In 2022, Lisa requested a meeting with Pawel Relowicz in prison, not for forgiveness, for truth. She wanted to know what happened in those final 20 minutes of Libby's life. I need to understand, she said, not to absolve him, but to finally stop imagining her suffering. At first, Pawel agreed. Then, weeks later, he withdrew. He claimed the media had twisted his story, that he was tired of being vilified. For Lisa, it wasn't disappointment, it was confirmation. That's what control looks like, she told a reporter, even behind bars. He still wanted the last word. Every morning, Lisa wakes to a few seconds of peace, that brief, merciful moment when the mind forgets, and then it returns. The cold night, the river, the silence. Sometimes, she said, I look at her photos, the same ones I've looked at 1,000 times, and I still ask why. Why someone thought they had the right to take her. Justice caught her killer. But true justice will come only when no other woman's safety depends on luck or the kindness of strangers. The story closes not with vengeance, but with a plea. If you believe, silence protects no one. If you've ever seen something wrong and turned away, speak. Because somewhere tonight, another young woman might be walking home in the dark. And what we choose to ignore could be the difference between life and death.